Joseph, the steward of faith, torn from his homeland and sold by his own brothers, the young man named Joseph was brought down into the splendor and strangeness of Egypt. The dust of the long journey still clung to him as he stood in the slave market, a world away from the pastures of Canaan. Yet, even in this place of profound loss, the great covenant of God, a promise weaving through generations, had not forgotten him. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was purchased by a man of great influence, Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the royal guard. Joseph entered Potiphar's household not as a guest, but as a slave, his future seemingly sealed by the whims of his powerful new master. But the hand of God works in ways that are far beyond human understanding and expectations. From the very first day, a divine blessing rested upon Joseph, a tangible favor that was evident in all of his assigned duties. Whatever he was tasked to do, he did with an excellence and wisdom that seemed to flow from a source far beyond his own abilities. If he tended the gardens, they flourished with an unusual vibrancy. If he managed accounts, they balanced with perfect clarity and order. Potiphar was a shrewd man, accustomed to judging the character of others, and he saw the profound integrity that defined the young Hebrew slave. He witnessed an undeniable prosperity in everything Joseph's hand touched, a divine favor so apparent that Potiphar simply could not ignore it. He recognized that the Lord, the God of this young Hebrew, was with him, making all that he did to prosper. Trust grew in Potiphar's heart, displacing the normal master-slave relationship, for he saw not a slave, but a capable and trustworthy steward. Soon, Potiphar elevated Joseph, placing him in charge over all that he had, from the sprawling fields to the intimate affairs of his house. Everything was placed under Joseph's complete and total authority, a testament to the trust he had earned through his faithfulness. Potiphar's trust was so complete that he concerned himself with nothing save the food he ate, leaving all else to his capable steward. The house of the Egyptian was blessed for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in the house and in the field. Joseph, now a man of striking appearance, walked with authority, his past suffering a distant memory, and his present a testament to God's faithfulness. But prosperity can attract envy, and unwavering integrity can incite temptation. As Potiphar's wife began to look upon Joseph with intense desire, her days were idle and her heart was empty, and she saw in this capable and handsome Hebrew a means to fill a void within her. Day after day, she cast longing eyes upon him, her intentions becoming increasingly bold and dangerously forward. At first, it may have been a lingering glance, then a suggestive word, but finally her desire consumed all of her discretion. "Lie with me," she commanded him, her voice a stark and shameless invitation that hung in the air between them with heavy expectation. Joseph was stunned by her directness, as this was not a request, but an order from the wife of the man who had shown him immense favor. To refuse her was to risk everything he had gained, but Joseph's loyalty was not merely to his human master, it was bound to a higher authority. His entire being was anchored in his personal relationship with God, a foundation that could not be shaken by temptation or threat. He refused her, his voice firm with a conviction that came from a place deep within his faithful soul. "Behold," he said, reasoning with her, "my master has entrusted everything in this house to my care, knowing not what is with me in the house. He has committed all that he has to my hand, and there is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me except you." He laid out the logic of his loyalty to Potiphar, the sheer scale of the trust he had been given. But his final reason transcended any human obligation, for it was the very bedrock of his character and the core of his being. "How then," he asked, his voice filled with a holy dread at the very thought of such a transgression, "can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" To Joseph, this was not simply an act of betrayal against a man, it was a profound sin against the God who had always been with him. His righteous answer did not deter her. It only seemed to inflame her desire and strengthen her resolve to have him for herself. Day after day she pressed him relentlessly, speaking to him with the same insistent and shameless demand for him to lie with her. And day after day, Joseph refused to listen to her, to lie with her, or even to be in her presence, creating distance to shield himself. Then came a fateful day when the house was empty, as the other servants were away attending to their duties outside the main residence. Joseph went into the house to do his work, focused and completely unsuspecting of the danger that was lurking nearby. It was the opportunity his temptress had been waiting for, a moment she had carefully anticipated to finally trap him. She saw him alone, and all of her patience vanished completely, replaced by a desperate, aggressive passion that she could no longer contain. She caught him by his outer garment, her grip like iron as she held on tightly, refusing to let him go. "Lie with me," she insisted once more, her voice no longer a suggestive whisper but a raw, desperate command. In that critical moment of intense pressure, Joseph did the only thing a righteous man could possibly do to escape the situation. He fled from her presence. He did not stay to argue with her or to fight against her aggressive advances. He abandoned his garment in her hand and ran from the house, choosing to lose his cloak rather than his precious integrity. He escaped the immediate temptation, but he could not escape the severe consequences of a woman who had been utterly scorned. Standing there alone, clutching the evidence of her failed seduction, her unfulfilled desire curdled into a venomous and destructive rage. Her pride was deeply wounded, and her will had been defied, so she would now have her terrible revenge against him. She called to the men of her household, her voice now filled with feigned terror and righteous indignation as she began to weave her lie. "See," she cried, holding up the garment for all to see. "He brought in a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out. When he heard my loud voice, he left his garment and fled out of the house." She carefully laid the cloak aside, waiting for her husband to return home, and met him with the same story, her words dripping with accusation. She pointed the finger not just at Joseph, but at Potiphar himself for bringing this foreigner into their home to begin with. "The Hebrew servant, whom you brought among us, came in to me to mock me, but as soon as I cried, he fled out of the house." Potiphar heard his wife's words, and he saw the garment she presented as undeniable evidence, and his trust in Joseph shattered in an instant. A hot, furious anger burned within him, consuming all the favor he had previously held for the young man he had so greatly elevated. The one in whom he had placed his complete confidence had seemingly betrayed him in the most profound and personal way. Justice in his mind had to be swift and severe, so Joseph was seized without any opportunity to defend himself against the accusations. There was no trial, no chance to speak in his own defense. The word of Potiphar's wife against a foreign slave was enough. He was taken and thrown into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, his reputation destroyed by a lie. The doors of the dungeon slammed shut, plunging him from the heights of stewardship into the depths of darkness and despair once more. Yet, even in the shadows of the prison, in the stench of injustice and the chill of stone walls, a familiar presence remained. But the Lord was with Joseph, showing him steadfast love and giving him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. The prison warden, much like Potiphar before him, saw something remarkably different in Joseph that set him apart from all the others. He saw competence, unwavering reliability, and an unshakable integrity that could not be hidden even by the darkness of a prison cell. This recognition of character began to build a foundation of trust between the warden and the Hebrew prisoner. The keeper of the prison soon committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the jail, a significant act of trust. Whatever was done there, from daily routines to important tasks, he was the one who was responsible for doing it. The warden paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him in all his endeavors. The warden's trust was absolute, for he saw the clear evidence of a higher power at work through his remarkable prisoner. He paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because he knew that the Lord was with him in that place. And whatever Joseph did, the Lord made it prosper, turning the darkness of the prison into a place of order and purpose. In the deepest darkness of his unjust confinement, a resilient seed of hope was planted and began to take root within his heart. For Joseph's journey and God's great covenant with his people was far from being over, despite the circumstances he faced. The path of redemption often leads through the deepest valleys before ascending to the highest and most glorious peaks.